Hi, friend. It's your inner child calling. And they want churros. A new toy. And a new adventure. Or maybe 5. With the bestest besties on Earth. Find your moment at Walt Disney World Resort.
I'm Nicola Coughlan, and for BBC Radio 4, this is history's youngest heroes. Rebellion, risk, and the radical power of youth.
She thought, right, I'll just do it. She thought about others rather than herself.
12 stories of extraordinary young people from across history.
There's a real sense of urgency in them, that resistance has to be mounted, it has to be mounted now.
Follow history's youngest heroes wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, I'm Joya Putnoy, and I'm a production assistant here at Wonder Media Network. I'm so excited to be guest hosting this episode of Womanica. This month, we're talking about architects. These women held fast to their visions for better futures, found potential in negative space, and built their creations from the ground up. July 30th, 1769. A company of Spanish soldiers and missionaries journey into unknown territory in the Americas. As they reach the crest of a hill, a beautiful valley spreads out before them. One chaplain writes in his journal of, quote, many green marshes, their banks covered with willows and grapes, blackberries, and innumerable Castilian rose bushes. For the Spanish, the idyllic scene represented possibility for strategic military outposts in the West, new trade routes to Asia, spreading Catholicism through establishing new missions. But for the many communities who already lived in the California Valley, the arrival of the Spanish represented an existential threat to their civilizations, traditions, and even their lives. Today, we're talking about an architect of a rebellion against Spanish colonization who has since become a hero for Indigenous communities in California. Please meet Toypurina. Toypurina was born in 1760 in Japjui, a community located in the modern-day San Gabriel Valley of California. She belonged to a group of Indigenous people that are today usually referred to as the Tongva. During this era, there were roughly 5,000 Tongva people living in and around the valley. Toypurina was around 11 years old when Spanish Franciscan monks established the San Gabriel mission in her home valley. One of their primary goals was to convert Indigenous people to Catholicism. Between 1772 and 1785, the monks baptized roughly 1,200 people. They called the newly baptized Tongva Gabrielinos. Most of the newly named Gabrielinos moved into the mission. This massively disrupted the lives of Tongva people who resisted baptism, like Toypurina and her family. The mission's farms encroached on land the Tongva needed to hunt. The livestock the Spanish had brought wreaked havoc on the local ecosystem, leaving communities outside the mission with fewer resources. Life for the baptized Tongva people inside the mission was not much easier. New and unfamiliar diseases brought by the Spanish ravaged the Indigenous population. They were not allowed to leave, and those who broke that rule were captured and punished. Residents were also subject to a strict schedule of labor and prayer. One visitor to a Spanish mission in California during the period observed, quote, we observed with concern that the resemblance is so perfect to a slave plantation that we have seen both men and women in irons and others in stocks. Lastly, the noise of the whip. The converted Tongva were also strongly discouraged from participating in the traditions of their old faith. This rule was loosely enforced in the early days of the mission, but as time wore on, the Spanish missionaries became more strict, forbidding the Tongva under their authority from performing rituals to help guide the dead into the spirit world. These harsh attempts to completely divorce the Tongva from their old way of life are perhaps what sowed the seeds for a rebellion. During the summer of 1785, one of the baptized Tongva, a man named Nicolas Jose, decided it was time to plan an attack on the mission. By this time, Toypurina was a well-respected medicine woman. Her brother was the leader of their community Japjui, and they were both well known among people in the scattered communities surrounding the mission. Nicolas sent Toypurina beads as an offering to exchange for her support in a rebellion. She agreed to help him and brought in people from 8 surrounding villages into the plan. One of the other village leaders snuck into the San Gabriel mission to whip up support among the baptized Tongva. They hoped to gather enough people from both inside and outside the mission that they could overpower the Spanish with one swift surprise attack. October 25th, 1785. Warriors from the 8 villages gathered to storm the mission and kill its leaders. Toypurina went with them, not planning to fight, but hoping that her presence would inspire and encourage the fighters. But the element of surprise slipped from their grasp. Someone had informed the missionary leadership of the planned revolt. When the rebelling forces arrived at the mission, Spanish soldiers were waiting to capture them. 21 people were arrested, including Toypurina and her fellow conspirators. The Spanish governor of California himself came to the San Gabriel mission to ensure the rebels were adequately disciplined. Most of the captives were publicly and brutally whipped and then sent back to their home villages to serve as warnings against future rebellion. Toypurina and the other leaders who had planned the attack were imprisoned and interrogated. Her captors accused her of tricking her fellow Tongva warriors into attacking the mission. According to historical records, Toypurina met them with equal hostility during questioning, telling them she was angry with the Padres and with all of those of this mission because they were living there in her land. Her words reveal frustration not only with the Spanish colonizers, but also with the Tongva people who had chosen to be baptized and absorbed into the mission, rather than resisting like she had. Toypurina was held as a prisoner at the mission for 2 years. In March of 1787, she was baptized, probably against her will, though it's impossible to know for sure. She was eventually banished to a more remote mission, cut off from the community she had always known. Newly dependent on the Spanish for survival, Toypurina married a Spanish soldier in 1789. They had 3 children together. Toypurina spent the rest of her short life following her husband from mission to mission. She died on May 22, 1799, at the Mission San Juan Bautista. She was only 39 years old. Toypurina has become a source of inspiration for her indigenous descendants in modern-day California, as well as other marginalized communities who relate to her struggle against oppression. Today, 2 monuments stand in her honor in Los Angeles County, in the same valley where she lived centuries ago. They commemorate her brave resistance against injustice and the cultural erasure of indigenous communities. All month, we're talking about architects. For more information, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Womanica Podcast. Special thanks to Jenny and Liz Kaplan for having me as a guest host. As always, we're taking a break for the weekend. See you on Monday.
I'm Nicola Coughlan, and for BBC Radio 4, this is history's youngest heroes. Rebellion, risk, and the radical power of youth.
She thought, right, I'll just do it. She thought about others rather than herself.
12 stories of extraordinary young people from across history.
There's a real sense of urgency in them, that resistance has to be mounted now.
Follow history's youngest heroes wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to the Criminalia podcast. I'm Maria Tremarchi.
And I'm Holly Fry. Together, we invite you into the dark and winding corridors of historical true crime.
Each season, we explore a new theme, from poisoners to art thieves.
We uncover the secrets of history's most interesting figures, from legal injustices to body snatching.
And tune in at the end of each episode as we indulge in cocktails and mocktails inspired by each story.
Listen to Criminalia on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.